August 7, 1942, 2 hours and 14 minutes. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The first American Marines of the 1st Division waded through the water to Red Beach, carrying weapons that would fundamentally challenge Japanese tactical doctrine. Among the guerans and bars, selected Marines carried Winchester Model 12 shotguns, pump-action weapons with a devastating capacity that Japanese military planners had never foreseen. Through the pre-dawn darkness, the Marines advanced inland from their landing beaches, encountering the first Japanese defensive positions near the Lunga River. What occurred in those initial engagements would demonstrate a catastrophic miscalculation in Japanese military planning. The Imperial Army had prepared for rifle combat at a distance. They had trained for bayonet charges and close-quarters sword combat. They had not prepared for American shotguns capable of firing as fast as a soldier could operate the pump action, a mechanical reality that would shatter Japanese tactical assumptions across the Pacific. The 2,200 Japanese defenders on Guadalcanal were about to discover that the American Marines had brought a weapon to the Pacific so effective in close combat that Germany had attempted to ban it from warfare in 1918. The Winchester Model 12, with its ability to fire multiple shells in rapid succession through slam fire, would prove particularly devastating in the jungle warfare, cave fighting, and night combat that characterized the Pacific theater of operations. The mathematics of combat were about to change. Each shell contained 9 pellets of double-aught buckshot. A Marine could fire 6 shells in less than 3 seconds using the slam fire technique. In those 3 seconds, 54 projectiles would saturate the target area, more than a Japanese soldier could fire in a minute with his bolt-action rifle. The Winchester Model 12 entered World War II with a reputation already established in the trenches of France. During World War I, American forces had employed earlier shotgun models with such effectiveness that, on September 15, 1918, the German government filed a diplomatic protest through Swiss channels. The protest, preserved in the United States Department of State Archives, alleged that shotguns violated Article 23E of the Hague Convention by causing unnecessary suffering. The German protest specifically stated, "The German government protests against the use of shotguns by the American Army and calls attention to the fact that, according to the law of war, every prisoner found in possession of such weapons or ammunition belonging to them forfeits his life." Secretary of State Robert Lansing's response was unequivocal. The United States rejected the protest and warned that any execution of American prisoners for carrying shotguns would result in reprisals. No American soldier was executed for carrying shotguns, and their use continued. The Model 12, introduced in 1912 as a civilian hunting weapon, had evolved. Significantly, by 1942, the military version, designated as the M12 trench gun, featured a 20-inch smoothbore barrel compared to the 26 to 30 inches of civilian models, a perforated metal heat shield, and a bayonet lug. More critically, it retained the absence of a trigger disconnector from the original design, a mechanical feature that allowed for slam fire. This capability was not accidental, but intentional. Winchester engineers designed the Model 12 so that by holding the trigger down while operating the pump action, the weapon would fire as rapidly as the operator could cycle it. While civilian shooters rarely used this feature, military instructors recognized its combat potential immediately. The Imperial Japanese Army built its defensive strategy in the Pacific upon several fundamental assumptions documented in its field manuals. According to the United States War Department Technical Manual, Handbook on Japanese Military Forces 1944, Japanese doctrine emphasized 2 primary tactical advantages: night fighting and close combat. The Japanese distinguished between Kishu, a surprise night attack, and Kyoshu, a night attack by force. Their infantry training dedicated extensive hours to night operations, movement in darkness, and silent infiltration techniques. The assumption validated in China and in early Pacific victories was that night combat negated American advantages in firepower and technology. Japanese training manuals emphasized that American forces were weak, in close combat, and dependent on mechanical superiority. When combat reached bayonet range, Japanese doctrine asserted that the superior spirit and training of Japanese soldiers would prevail. This belief was not merely propaganda, but fundamental to Japanese tactical planning. The fall of Singapore in February 1942 seemed to have validated these assumptions. Japanese forces had overwhelmed British positions through aggressive night attacks and close combat, defeating a numerically superior force. Similar successes in the Philippines reinforced the conviction that Americans, like other Western forces, could not match Japanese soldiers in short-range battles. The American invasion of Guadalcanal on August 7, 1942, marked the first offensive operation against Japanese forces. Among the equipment provided to Marine units were Winchester Model 12 shotguns, primarily distributed to personnel tasked with jungle patrols, point defense, and security duties. The exact number of Model 12s present on Guadalcanal remains uncertain in historical records, but evidence confirms their presence and use. Equipment manifests for the 1st Marine Division included riot-type shotguns in infantry battalions with supplies of buckshot and slug ammunition. The first major test came during the Battle of the Tenaru, actually the Ilu River, on August 21, 1942. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki led 916 men from his detachment in a night assault across the sandbar at the river's mouth, exactly the type of close combat night attack that Japanese doctrine prescribed. The outcome of the battle was catastrophic for the Japanese forces. Of the 916 attackers, approximately 800 were killed. While Marine machine guns and artillery inflicted many casualties, the short-range fighting saw the employment of shotguns in their intended role. After-action reports noted the effectiveness of all available weapons in repelling the assault, with specific mention of the value of increased firepower at close range. The effectiveness of the Model 12 derived from specific technical characteristics. According to U.S. Army ordnance tests, the military load of double-aught buckshot contained 33 caliber lead pellets. At 20 yards, these pellets maintained sufficient velocity to penetrate 3/4 of an inch of a pine board, used as a standard to approximate penetration in human tissue. The spread pattern was equally important. At combat ranges of 20 to 30 yards, the buckshot spread across approximately 30 inches, creating a pattern density that made precise aiming unnecessary. This characteristic proved crucial in jungle warfare, where targets were often fleeting glimpses through dense vegetation. The slam fire capability multiplied these advantages, while precise measurements of the rate of fire from World War II do not exist. Post-war tests demonstrated that experienced operators could fire 5 to 6 shells in less than 3 seconds using the slam fire technique. This rate of fire exceeded that of many automatic weapons at close range, with the added advantage of the spread pattern. Marines developed specific techniques for employing the Model 12. Training emphasized firing at ground level when defending against crawling infiltrators, exploiting the ricochet effect of buckshot on hard ground. In jungle environments, Marines learned to shoot at sound and movement rather than waiting for clear targets, trusting the spread pattern to compensate for imprecise aim. As Marine units gained experience between 1942 and 1943, the employment of shotguns became more sophisticated. The weapons proved particularly valuable in specific tactical situations that occurred repeatedly in Pacific combat. During the New Georgia Campaign from June to August 1943, Shotguns were increasingly assigned to scouts on jungle patrols. The ability to deliver immediate and devastating firepower in response to an ambush proved invaluable. A Marine at the point could react to movement or sound with instant, suppressive fire, potentially hitting multiple enemies with a single shot. Night defensive positions incorporated shotguns as a primary weapon against infiltration. Japanese tactics often involved small groups attempting to penetrate Marine lines in the darkness, relying on stealth and bladed weapons. Marines with shotguns could cover sectors with overlapping fields of fire, creating zones where infiltration became virtually impossible. The weapons also proved effective in what Marines called jungle lane shooting, clearing paths through dense vegetation where Japanese soldiers might hide. The spread pattern would hit multiple obstacles, potentially striking hidden enemies while simultaneously removing foliage that provided concealment. The campaign for the Central Pacific Islands introduced a new tactical challenge: Japanese cave fortifications. Beginning with Tarawa in November 1943 and escalating through subsequent operations, Japanese forces relied increasingly on caves and fortified bunkers rather than traditional defensive lines. By Peleliu, on September 15, 1944, Colonel Kunio Nakagawa had prepared an elaborate cave defense system. The island's coral ridges were riddled with natural caves that Japanese engineers had expanded and fortified. These positions, designed to withstand naval bombardment and aerial attack, required intimate close combat to be cleared. The Model 12 proved adaptable to this challenge. Marines developed cave-clearing techniques that exploited the shotgun's characteristics. The standard approach involved firing 1 or 2 shells into a cave entrance, allowing the buckshot to ricochet off the interior walls. The ricocheting pellets created what Marines described as a lead storm inside confined spaces. The psychological effect often exceeded the physical. Surviving Japanese soldiers reported that the sound of buckshot ricocheting in the caves was uniquely terrifying, a metallic scream that seemed to come from all directions. Simultaneously, the invasion of Saipan on June 15, 1944, saw the continued evolution of shotgun tactics. The Japanese garrison of 31,000 soldiers under Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito had prepared extensive fortifications, learning from previous American assaults. Marine units developed what they called shotgun teams, specialized groups tasked with close-range assault. These typically consisted of 2 Marines armed with shotguns, a bar gunner for suppressive fire, and 1 or 2 Marines with grenades. The teams operated as specialized assault elements, particularly effective against fortified positions. The battle for Saipan also saw increased use of specialized munitions. While double-aught buckshot remained the standard, Marines also employed solid slug rounds for long-range precision fire and smaller birdshot loads to remove vegetation and expose hidden positions. On July 7, 1944, Saipan saw the largest Japanese banzai charge of the war, with approximately 3,000 to 4,000 high satsiru, attackers assaulting American positions. While most casualties were inflicted by machine guns and artillery, the short-range fighting that penetrated American lines saw extensive use of all available weapons, including shotguns. The ability to deliver multiple projectiles without precise aiming proved valuable in the confused nighttime hand-to-hand combat. The combat for Iwo Jima, from February 19 to March 26, 1945, presented the ultimate test of cave warfare tactics. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had created the most sophisticated defensive system of the war. 11 miles of tunnels connecting more than 1,500 caves, pillboxes, and fortified positions. Kuribayashi had studied American tactics from previous battles and designed his defenses to counter them. Cave entrances were angled to prevent direct fire. Multiple exits prevented cornering, and internal chambers were offset to limit the effect of explosives and flamethrowers. Despite these preparations, Model 12 shotguns remained effective. Marines adapted by developing bank shots, deliberately ricocheting buckshot off tunnel walls to hit around corners. They also increased the use of white phosphorus shells, which created both casualties and smoke that forced Japanese soldiers to evacuate positions. The 21,000 Japanese defenders were gradually eliminated in brutal close-range fighting. Of these, only 216 were taken prisoner, most wounded or unconscious when captured. The nature of the fighting on Iwo Jima, with its emphasis on eliminating fortified positions at close range, highlighted the continued relevance of weapons like the Model 12. Despite the general mechanization of the war, the invasion of Okinawa on April 1, 1945, represented the largest amphibious operation of the Pacific War. General Mitsuru Ushijima commanded 100,000 Japanese troops in the most extensive defensive network ever built. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, Ushijima's operations officer and one of Japan's most brilliant staff officers, had designed the defense to maximize American casualties. On Okinawa, both sides had learned from 3 years of Pacific combat. Japanese forces no longer wasted themselves in banzai charges, but fought from prepared positions. Americans had refined their combined arms tactics, with shotguns playing a specific role in the close combat phases of cave and bunker reduction. The 82-day campaign saw the full evolution of American cave-clearing techniques. Marines and Army troops employed what they called blowtorch and corkscrew tactics. Flamethrowers provided the blowtorch, while demolitions and short-range weapons like shotguns served as the corkscrew to penetrate the positions. The actual production and distribution of Model 12 shotguns tell a different story from popular perception. According to Winchester Company records analyzed by historian Herbert G. Howes, only 61,014 Model 12 shotguns were manufactured during World War II. An additional 19,571 were repaired or refurbished by Winchester, leading to confusion over total numbers. These weapons were distributed across all branches of service: Marines, Army, Navy, and Army Air Forces, not exclusively to Marine units. The Army Air Forces, for example, used Model 12s for airfield defense and aircraft guard duties. The Navy employed them for shipboard security and landing party operations. This relatively limited production, 61,414 new weapons for an army of 12 million, meant that Model 12s were specialized weapons rather than general issue. They were concentrated in units that expected to face close combat: Marine rifle companies, Army assault teams, and security detachments. The ammunition supply was more abundant. Military contracts for shotgun shells reached into the millions, ensuring that units equipped with shotguns had adequate ammunition for both training and combat. The standard military load was .00 buckshot, with slug rounds and smaller shot sizes available for specific purposes. Evaluating the actual combat effectiveness of the Model 12 requires a careful analysis of the available evidence. After-action reports from Pacific battles consistently note the value of shotguns in specific situations while recognizing their limitations. The weapons excelled in several scenarios consistently reported across different battles. Jungle ambush response, the ability to deliver immediate and devastating firepower in response to sudden close-range contact. The spread pattern compensated for the difficulty of acquiring targets in dense vegetation. Night defense. Shotguns provided an effective defense against infiltration attempts. The sound of a pump action being cycled became a psychological deterrent, while the spread pattern increased the probability of a hit in the darkness. Cave and bunker clearing. The ricochet effect in confined spaces multiplied the weapon's effectiveness. Even when direct hits were not achieved, the psychological impact of buckshot ricocheting in enclosed spaces often forced Japanese soldiers to evacuate positions, final assault phases. When combat closed to ranges under 25 yards, shotguns provided superior firepower to bolt-action rifles and even some automatic weapons. However, the weapons had clear limitations. The effective range of 50 yards or less meant shotgun-armed troops were vulnerable to rifle fire at longer ranges. The ammunition was bulky and heavy compared to rifle rounds. The weapons required frequent cleaning in the corrosive salt air environment of the Pacific. Japanese forces attempted various countermeasures to American close combat weapons, including shotguns. These adaptations, documented in captured Japanese materials and post-war interrogations, reveal both the perceived threat and the difficulty of countering it. Some Japanese units experimented with body armor, including thick wooden or bamboo plates designed to stop buckshot. These proved to be cumbersome and only partially effective, as buckshot could still cause incapacitating injuries to exposed areas. Tactical adaptations included increasing the depth of defensive positions to prevent infiltration by assault teams, creating false positions to absorb initial attacks, and using obstacles to maintain engagement distances beyond shotgun range. Despite these efforts, Japanese forces never developed fully effective defenses against American close combat tactics. The fundamental problem was material. Japan lacked the industrial capacity to match American firepower at any distance, forcing continued reliance on tactics that brought them into the very short-range fights where weapons like the Model 12 excelled. The 1918 German protest regarding the use of shotguns created a legal precedent that influenced their employment in World War II. The American rejection of German protests established that shotguns were legitimate weapons of war under international law. Interestingly, despite the effectiveness of the Model 12 against Japanese forces, Japan never filed a similar protest. This absence may reflect several factors. Japan's own conduct in China violated numerous international conventions, making legal protests problematic. The deteriorating diplomatic situation left few channels for such protests, and by the time shotguns proved particularly effective, Japan was already losing the war decisively. The legal acceptance of shotguns as legitimate weapons contrasted with restrictions on other weapons. Poison gas, banned after World War I, was not used in the Pacific, despite the tactical advantages it might have provided in cave warfare. The shotgun, despite its devastating effects at close range, remained within the accepted bounds of war. The Marine Corps developed specific training programs for shotgun employment based on combat experience. The Scouts and Snipers School at Camp Lejeune included shotgun training, although the exact World War II curriculum has not survived in detail. Training emphasized several fundamental principles derived from combat experience in ammunition management. Unlike rifle ammunition, shotgun shells were bulky and heavy. Marines learned to carry shells in elastic loops on belts and bandoliers for quick access. The standard load was 50 to 60 shells, with replenishment being a constant concern. Shooting positions. Pump action required different stances than rifle shooting. Marines practiced firing from the hip while moving, instinctive shooting without using sights, and maintaining balance while cycling. The action rapidly. Target selection. Shotgunners learned to engage the nearest threats first and sweep multiple targets rather than focusing on individuals. The spread pattern meant that precise aiming was less important than rapid target engagement. Weapon maintenance. The Pacific environment was particularly hostile to weapons. Salt spray, sand, and humidity could quickly render a Model 12 inoperative. Daily maintenance became essential, with emphasis on keeping the action clean and lubricated. American use of shotguns in World War II was relatively unique among the major combatants. Other nations' approaches to close combat revealed different tactical philosophies. Great Britain. The British military made limited use of shotguns, primarily for prisoner guard duties and specialized operations. British doctrine emphasized the submachine gun, particularly the Sten, for close combat. Soviet Union. The Soviets relied heavily on the PPSH-41 submachine gun for close combat, producing over 6 million during the war. The high rate of fire and larger magazine capacity suited Soviet mass assault tactics. Germany. Despite protesting the use of shotguns in World War I, Germany produced limited numbers of shotguns for combat on the Eastern Front. However, the MP-40 submachine gun remained their primary close combat weapon. Japan. Japan produced virtually no combat shotguns, maintaining a focus on rifles, bayonets, and traditional bladed weapons for close combat. This reflected both industrial limitations and cultural preferences. The American adoption of shotguns reflected a pragmatic approach to war, using the most effective tool for specific situations regardless of traditional military conventions. Understanding the role of the Model 12 requires placing it within the broader context of American combat doctrine in the Pacific. The weapon was one element in a combined arms approach that integrated naval fire, air support, artillery, automatic weapons, flamethrowers, and demolitions. The typical sequence for reducing a fortified Japanese position around 1945 illustrates this integration. Naval fire and aerial bombardment to suppress and isolate the position. Artillery and mortar fire to prevent reinforcements. Machine guns and bar fire to suppress defensive fire. Assault teams approach with flamethrowers and demolitions. Shotguns employed in the final assault phase to clear positions. Engineers seal or destroy the position. The shotgun's role was specific but important, providing overwhelming firepower at close range during the critical moments when American and Japanese soldiers met at distances measured in feet rather than yards. The psychological impact of weapons often exceeds their physical effects. The Model 12 had demonstrable effects on both American and Japanese morale, though these should be evaluated carefully given the propaganda and mythology surrounding the weapons. For American forces, the shotgun provided confidence in close combat situations. Marines and soldiers knew they possessed devastating firepower at close range, reducing anxiety about Japanese infiltrations and banzai charges. The mechanical simplicity and reliability of the Model 12 also inspired confidence. It rarely jammed and was simple to operate under stress. The distinct sound of a pump action being cycled became a morale factor in its own right. Veterans reported that the sound reassured Allied troops while potentially deterring enemy action. This psychological effect, though difficult to quantify, appears consistently in veteran accounts. After Japan's surrender, the U.S. military conducted an extensive analysis of weapon effectiveness in the Pacific War. The Model 12 and other shotguns received mixed reviews. The weapons were credited with exceptional effectiveness in specific situations, particularly in cave clearing and night defense. The ability to deliver multiple projectiles without precise aiming proved valuable in the confused short-range combat common in the Pacific. However, analysts also noted limitations. Short range left shotgun-armed troops vulnerable in open terrain. The weapons were less effective against Japanese bunkers with small firing slits. The logistical burden of supplying specialized ammunition complicated supply operations. Despite these limitations, shotguns remained in the U.S. military inventory. The Model 12 served in Korea, where it again proved effective in close combat and night fighting. In Vietnam, Shotguns were employed by scouts on patrols and for tunnel clearing operations, directly applying lessons learned in the Pacific. The mechanical design of the Model 12 influenced subsequent military shotguns. The pump-action mechanism proved to be more reliable in combat conditions than semi-automatic designs. The slam-fire capability, though eventually eliminated for safety reasons in civilian models, remained valued for military applications. The historical record of Model 12 employment in World War II comes from multiple sources, each with limitations. Official after-action reports. These provide tactical overviews but rarely detail individual weapon employment. References to shotguns typically appear only when noting special effectiveness or problems. Unit equipment records. These document the distribution of shotguns but not actual combat use. Many records were lost or destroyed during the war. Technical manuals. Military manuals describe weapon operation and basic employment, but not specific combat experiences. Veteran accounts, post-war memoirs, and oral histories provide anecdotal evidence, but must be carefully evaluated for accuracy and representation. Japanese records, captured documents, and post-war interrogations provide the enemy's perspective, but are limited by translation issues and the destruction of many Japanese records. Photographic evidence. Combat photographs occasionally show Marines with shotguns, but cannot document their effectiveness. This fragmentary evidence requires careful analysis to separate documented facts from mythology and assumptions. The employment of the Model 12 highlighted the vast industrial and technological gulf between the United States and Japan. American forces could afford to issue specialized weapons for specific tactical situations. The industrial capacity to produce 61,014 shotguns, weapons with limited military application, while simultaneously producing millions of rifles, hundreds of thousands of machine guns, and tens of thousands of artillery pieces, demonstrated overwhelming material superiority. Japan, conversely, struggled to provide basic rifles and ammunition to its forces. The Japanese Type 99 rifle, though excellent in design, suffered from declining manufacturing quality as the war progressed. By 1945, Japanese forces were employing bamboo spears alongside rifles, highlighting their industrial collapse. This disparity extended to ammunition. American forces could expend shotgun shells freely in training and combat. Standard procedure called for the use of new ammunition and the disposal of shells that showed any corrosion or damage. Japanese forces, meanwhile, counted every rifle round and often relied on captured ammunition. The development of shotgun tactics in the Pacific demonstrates American military adaptability. Unlike rigid military hierarchies that imposed tactics from the top down, American forces encouraged innovation at the small unit level. Marines who discovered effective techniques shared them informally. Successful methods spread through units via word of mouth and demonstration. Officers incorporated proven techniques into training and doctrine. This bottom-up innovation process allowed for rapid tactical adaptation. The bank shot technique for cave clearing, for example, seems to have developed independently in multiple units facing similar challenges. Marines discovered that buckshot ricocheted predictably off rock walls, allowing them to shoot around corners. This technique, born of necessity and experimentation, became standard procedure. Similarly, the use of mixed ammunition loads, alternating buckshot and slug shells, developed from combat experience rather than pre-war doctrine. Marines learned that the combination provided flexibility in engaging varied targets without switching weapons. Although tactical weapons like the Model 12 played important roles, the outcome of the Pacific War was determined by larger strategic factors. American submarine warfare strangled Japanese logistics. Strategic bombing destroyed Japanese industry. naval supremacy isolated Japanese garrisons. Atomic bombs ended Japanese resistance without invasion. Within this strategic framework, weapons like the Model 12 contributed to tactical success that supported operational and strategic objectives. The efficient reduction of Japanese positions conserved American manpower, maintained offensive momentum, and demonstrated the futility of continued resistance. The shotgun's effectiveness in cave clearing, for example, reduced casualties in the grinding battles of attrition from 1944 to 1945. Each fortified position cleared quickly meant fewer American casualties and a faster advance toward strategic objectives such as airfields and ports. The employment of the Model 12 in the Pacific offers lessons in military innovation and adaptation. Existing technology in new applications. The Model 12 was a 30-year-old design when World War II began. Innovation did not come from new technology, but from applying existing technology to new tactical problems. User-driven innovation. The most effective tactics developed from bottom-up experimentation by combat users rather than top-down doctrine development. Specialized versus general use. The Model 12 excelled in specific situations but had clear limitations. Military forces must balance specialized capabilities with general use requirements. Training and technology. Weapon effectiveness depended on proper training. Technology alone, without doctrine and training, provides limited advantage. Industrial base. The ability to produce and supply specialized weapons and ammunition depends on a robust industrial capacity. Tactical innovation requires logistical support. Behind the technical and tactical analysis were human beings. American Marines and soldiers who carried Model 12s into combat, and Japanese soldiers who faced them. Their experiences, though, filtered through memory and mythology, provide an essential perspective. Marines who carried shotguns often did so by choice, trading the longer range of rifles for devastating close-range firepower. This decision reflected individual assessment of tactical requirements and personal preference. Some Marines swore by the shotgun's effectiveness. Others preferred the versatility of rifles. Weapon operation under the stress of combat tested human capabilities. Slam fire required physical strength and coordination while under fire. The technique that seemed simple in training became challenging when exhausted, terrified, or wounded. Nevertheless, Marines consistently performed these actions effectively in combat. The employment of the Winchester Model 12 in the Pacific War demonstrated both American military adaptability and industrial capacity. The weapon proved exceptionally effective in specific tactical situations: cave clearing, night defense, jungle ambush response, and final assault phases. Its slam fire capability provided devastating close-range firepower that Japanese forces struggled to counter. However, the impact of the Model 12 must be understood within its proper context. Only 61,014 were produced during World War II, making it a specialized weapon rather than a primary infantry armament. Its effectiveness depended on integration with other weapons in combined arms tactics. The outcome of the Pacific War was determined by strategic factors far beyond tactical weapons. The Japanese military failure to anticipate or counter the employment of American shotguns reflected broader miscalculations about American military capabilities. Japanese doctrine emphasized spiritual factors and individual warrior skills while underestimating American material superiority and tactical innovation. The Model 12, simple in design but devastating in application, embodied the American pragmatic approach to war. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, through jungles and caves, the distinct sound of the pump-action cycling marked American tactical innovation. Marines and soldiers armed with Model 12s demonstrated that industrial democracy could develop and employ specialized weapons for specific tactical challenges. The weapon Germany had protested as inhumane proved to be simply another tool in the American arsenal. The legacy of the Model 12 extends beyond World War II. The tactics developed in the Pacific influenced American military doctrine through Korea, Vietnam, and contemporary conflicts. The emphasis on close combat firepower, specialized weapons for specific situations, and user-driven tactical innovation remains relevant to modern warfare. Japanese infantry never expected Winchester M12 trench guns to slam fire through their defenses because such weapons violated their fundamental assumptions about warfare. The Model 12 delivered a simple message. American forces would apply overwhelming firepower at all ranges using every available. Technology adapted through continuous innovation. In the brutal arithmetic of Pacific combat, the Model 12 added its weight to the scales of American victory. The transformation was complete not just through the Model 12, but through what it represented: the American will to adopt any effective weapon, develop innovative tactics, and apply industrial production to tactical problems. The Japanese infantry who faced these weapons discovered that their opponents had mastered not just the art of war, but the science of systematically applying firepower to destroy any defense, overcome any obstacle, and achieve victory through material superiority combined with tactical innovation.